Hey everyone, Pixel Riffs here with something we actually kind of forgot to mention in this show. There is an end of year discount happening over at our Patreon page right now. So if you head over to patreon.com/thespawnchunks to sign up to support the show, you can get a bit of an end of year discount. So you can save 20% on your first month on selected tiers. Anytime December 22nd through the 31st of 2025. Just use the code CHUNK25 when you check out, and you have the option to input a code, and that'll get you 20% off your first period supporting the Spawn Chunks on Patreon. Thank you so much, and now, on with the show. Welcome to the Spawn Chunks, episode number 381 for Monday, December 22nd, 2025. This is a podcast all about Minecraft, available across all major podcast platforms, including a video version that goes out on YouTube and Spotify. If you're enjoying the show, consider subscribing wherever you're listening to this. My name is Johnny, but the internet knows me as Pixel Riffs, and joining me from the future, or perhaps the past, it's Joel Duggan. Hi, Joel.
Hello. Either way, no matter where I am located, I am disappointed in the pizza I had last night. And if you would like to hear that rant and also a bit more of a positive spin about our favorite takeout places, some of the experiences that we've had, some of our favorite local chains for us when we do want good pizza or good fish and chips, then you should listen to The Render Distance. It's the extended version of the podcast. It's where Johnny and I hang out for 15 or 20 minutes before the show and another 10 or 15 after the show for our patrons. You get to listen live in the Discord, and you get extra content every single week when you sign up at patreon.com/thespawnchunks. You also get access to things like the monthly Minecraft Hangout and the quarterly Hangout. And both of those end up being a little bit larger in the new year. We have the first quarterly Hangout in the new year will be a year review as well as a quarterly. And then the monthly Minecraft Hangout is actually going to be December and January, because we normally do these at the end of the month. Christmas is at the end of the month. So we're going to kind of bump the December Hangout into January and have 2 months of our community talking about what they've been doing in Minecraft and sharing with us on a bonus episode that happens in January.
Yes, so the Render Distance guaranteed to make you hungry in the meantime, but we're pre-recording this for the holidays, so we've been talking a lot about pizza and not about Christmas dinner because, yeah, this is being recorded a little bit early. So you can also expect an email that is light on news and discussion about what we've been doing, but bursting at the seams with listener emails, since we like to take a bit more of a community focus over the holidays. So we'll kick that off in a second, but first of all, what's new with you on the Citadel, Joel?
So I have been plugging away on the command center. There's not a lot of new stuff to talk about. I've just decided this week to take the design elements I like and to progress them throughout the build. And so it's just a lot of repetition is essentially what's going on. I have completed the panels as well as the underside of all 4 wings, but I'm in the process of putting together the in-between sections, and the in-between sections have like a very specific look to them that I like. I haven't decided on the whole thing, but I do like the vertical sort of striations. It almost looks like an accordion look. They look very structural, but they also give a lot of depth, and I'm in the process of figuring out how they meet in the middle. I still don't know how that's going to happen, so I thought I should just take the things that I like and move them around. And as a result, I ended up kind of shaving off the bottom of some of the panels because it looked too square and too odd. And I preferred having perpendicular angles. So thankfully, I'm pretty familiar now with doing something at roughly a 30-degree angle in Minecraft, which is like 2 over 1 up or reverse. And so I've been messing around with that, and I've so far liked the results. It's a little chunky, but again, I'm trying to lean into that because it lends itself very well to Minecraft. And I've just been repeating the process. And as I've mentioned before, I won't get into the rant now, but it is slow going when you have a ghast that's moving around at the speed of snot and you're trying to copy over a design. The irony is that by the time you get good at this, like, okay, this is the 4th or 5th or 8th time that I've done this pattern, and you're like, this is going really smoothly. Like, the first one took me 2 hours on stream. The next time I did one of these, it took me the stream to do both sides, the bottom and the front. I thought, that's great. It's the last one I have to do. So now that I'm good at it, I'm done. So it was not the most productive, I guess, set of streams this week in terms of new stuff, but definitely I had some some progress, and it is cool to see it all come together, but it does feel very much like a cross. I was not expecting it to feel so much like a plus sign or a cross. I really need to figure out a way to fill out the middle and the footprint. And I feel like the map view where I look at it top down is trying to inform me about what I want to do to change that. And it's weird how when you have a map like that, you start to look at it as part of the creative process, like part of the build and how it looks, when no one else can see it unless they've got the map mod on the server. Like most people that see my build are people that are looking at screenshots or looking at videos. So how it looks from the player perspective is the most important, but for whatever reason, the map really plays an important role in my design perspective. So I'm going to try to fill it out in the middle and have it look a little bit different. And the shape I'm going for, I think, is going to be an octagon, because I've done a lot of circles. A lot of the towers in West Hill were circular, even though they were small. And I've done other builds on the server that were circular or cylindrical, I guess. And I'm trying to avoid that. I'm trying to branch out and do different shapes and try different things. And so I thought some harsher angles would be good. So I looked up, I think it was one of the shape tools that you shared in the resource mine on the Discord that I went to, and started typing out different diameters for octagons. And so I'm going to try to do that and see what I can come up with, because I'd like to have some sort of power core or some sort of central thing in the middle. And that's kind of what I've been doing this week. As I've been building these exterior parts, I've been thinking about how I want the middle to look. Does it have an atrium-like center that goes all the way to the ceiling? Does it have multiple floors where you actually can't see the top floor from the bottom floor? How do I want to get around? I really need to think about where I'm going to put access. Like I can fly around with the Elytra and that's fine, but I want there to be some sort of logical way for people that would be in this facility to move around. So having some sort of elevator, I think, would be cool. I want to maybe utilize things like a honey block elevator, or maybe bubble vaders or something, to try and have some cool sci-fi stuff. I may also just go right into the command block idea. And someone mentioned this in my chat a long time ago. It's like, I'm using command blocks to teleport around the server to go to these different zones. And you're in the sci-fi zone. The command blocks are allowed on the server. Like, you could just have like a teleporter that teleports you to different floors. And that's possible. I might try to mess around with that, but I'm not really sure. I do like the idea of leaning into something like a honey block elevator, something where the bubble vader is in the back, but the honey blocks let your player hitbox go through them. So then you catch the corner of the bubbles and you go up. Even though you're not in water, you just kind of levitate up to the next floor. The difficulty there is trying to control what floor you get on and off. And I might want to have those exposed. The cool thing is they look nice. Like, if you light them up from behind, of course, honey blocks are translucent, so they'll have a nice orange glow. So that's the kind of thing I'm battling with. I want to do like a warp core or some sort of cool central thing. Originally, it was going to be like a crystal that had power, but now I'm wondering, do I want to do something like that with the crystal exposed, or do I want to have some sort of like chunky octagonal thing in the middle that's moving or being lit up in a process? So I'm kind of up in the air about how I want to do all of this, because the inspiration for this is an image that has the outside. There's no information about the inside. Everything else in the inside I'm making up as I go. And so I'm trying to do that, and also think about what I want to use the space for. And I'm trying not to put all kinds of little farms and utilities inside of this thing and then negate the idea of having other buildings on the island that do the same stuff. So like, I don't want to build a little bamboo farm in here, even though I'd have room for a decent sized one. I want that to be its own building. Yeah. Right. So I'm trying not to have like too much of these little things. So I'm leaning on maybe having, well, my storage for sure, and where to put that. But then also maybe like a village or trading hall or something. Like, maybe this would be a good place to do that. I'm not really sure what else, but I'm trying not to do too much inside that would then take away from other building ideas that would be fun to do. So we'll see. But so far, it's just been a lot of repetition.
And you're no stranger to building stuff just for the sake of having an aesthetic interior to something, with what you did with West Hill. So like, I can see that also just being like, crew decks and things like this. If this is, something that's, whether it's like a housing module for the people who need to be close to the center of the operation or whatever, like from a sci-fi context, I feel like you can justify it in a lot of different ways and not have it need to be a utilitarian space in the same way that a lot of people design bases in the game, especially since like, you've got all of this space around you, you've got this big mushroom island, and you have an aesthetic now that once you've established that, you can think about, okay, what does this look like for the small little, like, refineries and things like that. I'm also thinking of this from a very much like a StarCraft point of view, which I know is a game that you and I have in common. So
yes.
I'm thinking like all of the little Terran modular base stuff, like whereas the barracks going, that's a whole separate thing that's been dropped in from orbit, whereas the kind of, the resource refineries and stuff like that, all of the little kind of, housing modules or farms or whatever from the sort of Warcraft days you would need to sustain your troops and that kind of thing. And then, research lab here, psionics division there, that kind of thing. You can get away with a lot of different stuff, whether it's sort of in world or whether it's just skewed to whatever Minecraft resource you can figure out to farm there. It's interesting at a time when right now I've been watching some folks on Hermitcraft this weekend. Doc M is taking advantage of the fact that you can put a load of resource farms just in a single chunk now, because chunk loading works in such a way that it will random tick stuff in that area. So you could still have crop farms and iron farm and like all of these other things, and behavior and stuff can still function without the player being there in a very compact space. But on the flip side of that, I've got you, and you're trying to like spread things out over a wide enough area just to have like all of those things also has a form as well of a function, and like having so much area in which to build, you feel like you've got to fill out that space. And it's just highlighting to me the amazing differences between the way people can play in this game, and there's a lot of different approaches to the same problems, right?
And I'm trying to unlearn what I have learned, which is, like build a super smelter and then that's it. You only need the one. Well, why do I need the one? Why can't I build 4 small ones, right? Like, what if I need to smelt, or use bamboo to power my smelters, and I make this big bamboo farm? Do I make a big bamboo farm and then try to figure out the logistics of moving that bamboo to all the different places in this Mushroom Island, which could be cool. I mean, that could be fun, like mine carts or something, flying things around. But at the same time, I also know that the small bamboo farm that I've made just to give myself a supply of chests that are auto-crafted in the background, it's 5 blocks of bamboo. Like, that's it. That's all that's being grown. And it's slow enough and methodical enough that it just slowly ticks up my chest count. And I could do that for anything, any farm, any autocrafter that needs some sort of smelting. I could just build its own little power source. I don't need to have one giant one. So it's just like, well, what's more fun? What's more practical? What provides some interesting challenges? I do like the idea of moving things around in minecarts, even though I'd have to come up with a way to maybe not make it look like they're minecarts, like it kind of house the rails underneath something. Or I could do something like a texture pack and turn the minecart rails into like a monorail and have the minecarts just be like a different color, or maybe have some lights on them or something. There could be some really fun things in there, but I haven't gotten that far. Like right now, it's one of those things where like I'm like a dog with a bone. I've started this command center and like hell or high water. I'm trying to finish it. I'm trying not to have this be 6 months just on this command center. Like, I really want this to be done so I can start to branch off and do other things.
Yeah, well, I feel like the same thing is going to be true of what you did with the walls, where like you spend 2 hours doing the first one, but then the next one is like half an hour to do one of the walls. It's going to be the same thing with the build style, right? It's going to snowball a little bit to the point where you're like, I have this dialed in right now. You can start to improvise stuff instead of the more meticulous planning that goes into it. And some of those little modular things, even if you develop one thing that you're like, okay, because they're working from like a kit with each of these buildings, almost like you develop prefab shapes that you can put together, and you're like, suddenly I can build whatever I want out of these pieces, and you don't really have to think about it. So I imagine you'll get to that point. It's just establishing the build style and nailing down the aesthetic pieces that you want to fit together in the first place.
Yeah, it's getting there. And it's a fun challenge to be working in a different style that I'm used to. And I do find I've hit some creative blocks, and I'm trying to think about other things on the server. I do have a list of other things that need to be done on the server. So there might be some points where I'm just like, you know what? I need to just take a break from this and go like, kill the dragon, or, do something else on the server that needs doing to kind of give myself some freedom to think and percolate on what's next. But speaking of what's next, what's next for you on the survival guide?
Well, I am in Mountain Mayhem now, as you probably heard last week, because I've probably already shared my thoughts on the spear in last week's episode, for those of you who are listening to this on the podcast feed instead of listening live in the Discord. So I've decided to save one aspect of that, which is my experience with zombie horses for today. So while I was testing out the spear and demonstrating it and kind of moving up through the different tiers of material, I ran into one zombie horseman, and then I later ran into another one when I had an upgraded spear and could maybe fight it one-on-one. So the first one, I was on horseback. I was running around, I think, with an iron spear and, mowing down mobs in my path. And then a zombie horseman with a spear spawned. And I went, oh, great, we can do the jousting part of this, which isn't really accessible to me as like a PvP thing, being in a single player world. So I ended up unseating the rider, which was very exciting. I feel like there needs to be a little bit more feedback when that happens, because it was more just like I ran at the zombie, I ran past him, couldn't really see what had happened, and then when I turned around, the zombie was on the floor and the horse was sort of wandering off in a different direction. But then the second fight was more of like I was on the ground and I was poking the horseman on horseback with the spear, and that felt like he was doing a lot more damage to me because he was coming at me with the speed of the horse plus the charge attack with the spear. So they're an interesting fight. It's actually kind of interesting, especially if you want to preserve the horse. Like if you're being a little bit more considered with how you're approaching the combat. I think the spear is still pretty good at making sure you hit one target and not the other, unlike the sword where you've kind of got sweeping edge and you're sometimes hitting both.
Right.
And also, obviously, you have to reach up towards the zombie to really like hit that as a target. But in general, I think the zombie horse appearing every so often is an interesting mix-up to the standard like array of mobs, and I'm fairly certain it's still based quite heavily in a high local difficulty rating. I didn't check what like the phase of the moon was in my world at the time, but I'm playing on normal difficulty, but I've lived in these chunks for ages because it was right by my spawn area, so a very occupied area, one where, you know, some of the higher like level mobs are generating stuff like witches and endermen show up a bit more frequently. And so the zombie horse was the first time I'd actually encountered one spawning in survival, having done a couple of tests in creative when the snapshots were going, but still not really like had an encounter with them yet. But it was nice to be doing that in a situation where I had a lot of equipment already, and I imagine that's the reason that they're saved for higher levels of local difficulty that build up when you spent more time in a chunk, because you're more likely to have gear that can withstand one of these guys running at you with a spear. Because I imagine if they were doing like maybe 4 hearts of damage to me, as I was probably running towards them, adding my momentum to the attack as well, but I get the sense that with no armor, I would have been toast in a couple of hits. So I'm quite happy that I was, wearing protection, still had my elytra on, so I wasn't like fully protected, but an interesting encounter as a hostile mob. But then having unseated one of the riders, I decided I'm going to tame that horse. Immediately had to drag it inside because the sun was about to rise, and I know they burn in the sun. I've never really been much of a horse guy, but I thought I might as well just grab this one while I can. Who knows when the opportunity is going to arise again. And so I tamed this horse, made sure it was like name tagged and stuff so it didn't despawn, even though I realized afterwards that I should probably just have continued to tame the horse, because once you've tamed it, it's going to be persistent. But I ended up naming it Green Beauty because Black Beauty was taken and this horse was very green. But in the end, yeah, it was it's nice to have a bit more variety in the horses. I put some netherite horse armor on it so it didn't burn in the sun, and that was also a good excuse to craft netherite horse armor. Now we have that. Probably never again, to be honest. I think it's perhaps a bit of a waste of a netherite ingot, especially if you want all your horses to look the same and you've got the ancient debris to spare, go for it. But I can think of much better uses for a netherite ingot. That said, I do think it looks really good on the zombie horse. I think it's got a nice kind of color contrast, and I think overall I'd be way more interested in the zombie horse if I was interested in horses in general, because it seems like they have a fixed HP, but they do have variable speed and jump height when you tame them. They cannot, however, be bred because they're zombies, so you need to effectively farm them by having those nighttime encounters and trying to, get as many zombie horses from that as possible, and then test whether or not they are, fast runners, good jumpers, that kind of thing, and then select from those which you want to use. Whereas horses, you can breed them selectively for their characteristics, and you can get some pretty ridiculous results out of that now that they've tweaked that a little bit in more recent updates. So, yeah, I'm curious if I end up using the zombie horse for much in future. I think at the very least I might do an episode on those staircases you can make out of like things like cake slices, where because horses
Right.
can like run up a block like that, you can make some very steep staircases, which is always fun. But yeah, outside of things like that, I'm not planning on using the zombie horse all that much. It was just neat to have them in the world for the first time. And considering the legacy of these creatures, the fact that they've obviously been in the code for ages, but this is their first time appearing in survival, it felt like enough of a novelty that I didn't just like sweep it to one side and go, I don't really care about this. I took the opportunity, and it's fun to have a zombie horse knocking around now.
Is there leather horse armor at all?
Yes, there is. Yeah, so you can dye that the same colors you can dye leather armor, I believe.
Right.
And
So you could have like green armor or black armor or something a little bit more dark. Because I'm just thinking like having 4 zombie horses in a build, like a carriage build or some sort of giant Roman. I don't know what they're called, but the kind of things where they used to do like chariot battles and stuff in
yeah,
in
like an
ancient
arena
Rome.
of some kind, yeah.
Yeah. So having like the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse and have them all as zombie horses, right? As just like a build. And somehow have them like corralled or pinned so they don't wander away. And it looks like they're pulling some giant doom chariot with like jack-o'-lanterns and stuff on it. Could be like a fun Halloween build or whatever.
Yeah,
I have seen, I don't know where I saw it, but I saw someone put copper horse armor on a zombie horse. And that looks pretty sharp too, as far as the color contrast goes. But I can see the netherite armor also looking kind of spooky and, very, not grimy, but like it has the right tone, I guess,
Yeah.
for the zombie horse.
It's got that kind of darker vibe to it. And yeah, I can imagine, because the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, it's war. You could imagine just like getting, I don't know, a brown horse or something like, or a black horse. Famine could have like the skeletal horse. Pestilence could be the zombie horse, and then death usually has a white horse traditionally, and like the imagery of it all. So like, yeah, I think that could be a fun little thematic build to do. Yeah. It feels like at least an interesting experience, different to the skeletal horses, because those appear during thunderstorms and they're automatically tamed, whereas this felt like a creature that spawns sort of at nighttime and you can tame them. I think it feels like a neat little variation on the horses that you have in game already. A couple of extra things to think about so you don't just, have exactly the same experience with the zombie horses you would with the other types of horses. So, yeah, I'm hopeful that I'll find more uses for it in the near future. For now, we would normally be moving on into the news, but there is no news this week since Mojang is on holiday and we're pre-recording this, so any news that might have come out last minute, unfortunately, is going to pass us by and have to wait until we start recording episodes in the new year. So for now, instead, we're going to move directly on into Chunk Mail. This is our listener email portion and is going to cover the place of the main discussion this week as well, because we have a bunch of holiday mail in the holiday mailbag. So if you'd like to email the show, chances are at this point you'll be hearing your email read on the show in the new year if it is selected. Spawnchunkmail@gmail.com is and remains the email address to send listener email into. Please keep the emails short and to the point as well if you can. It really does help us include them in the show more easily. And let us know if you're a patron in the subject line of the email, because it'd be great to get some emails from our patrons as well. Joel is going to kick us off with this first one.
The first email is from Caleb with a K, Netherite Alternatives. Speaking of Netherite armor. Hello, Johnny and Joel. Ever since Minecraft 1.16 came out, I've been intrigued by the idea of upgrading old diamond equipment to Netherite. I'm surprised no other similar armor types have been added. What if you combined chain armor or chainmail armor with diamond armor to give extra protection against melee attacks, which would give an actual use for chainmail armor? Also, what if you had echo equipment that eliminated the 5-minute despawn timer and possibly gave an occasional audio cue when on the ground, so you never lose your pickaxe because you took too long to find it with your recovery compass? What do you think? Where could we find these upgrade templates to be used in this way? Caleb with a K got the achievement for eternal dedication for obtaining an echoing hoe.
The echoing hoe is very fun, and yes, it wouldn't be a mailbag episode without somebody suggesting uses for the echo shard. So we're
Right.
officially in email territory at this point. But honestly, I really like this great idea for the oft mentioned echo shards, and they didn't even say echo shard specifically, but I assume echo equipment, sort of upgrading it with that material. And I do like the idea of equipment that's resistant to despawning in the same way that netherite makes it resistant to fire or lava. I like the idea of there being a fork in the upgrade path that could take you down the route of Echo armor instead. I think aesthetically, the texture of an Echo shard could make for some interesting looking armor, almost as though it's got like a little sparkly armor trim to it already. But yeah, I do think part of the reason that they don't mess around with the 5-minute despawn timer thing too much is because a lot of items just being dropped on the ground in the world builds up lag, right? But if it's minimal enough that it is limited to just important equipment, then I think it serves the same purpose as netherite equipment not being burned in fire. I think that's actually quite helpful to players, especially players who want a nice middle ground between keep inventory and the traditional survival experience without that. So I think it's a neat idea. I think it's something that I could see them doing, at least visiting that idea in future, whether with Echo Shards or something else. And in terms of where you'd find that, I imagine ancient cities are kind of a shoe-in for that idea, but I like the idea of tying in other structures into that ecosystem because we already find the Echo Shards in ancient cities. Think about, you find a netherite upgrade template in a bastion, you don't always find ancient debris or netherite ingots there. So you're encouraged to go looking for those in different places. And maybe if, a trial chamber could perhaps have an Echo upgrade template as a reward there, that'd give you another reason to visit trial chambers, and it might even provide some info for lorehounds to kind of tie together the existence of trial chambers as these ancient structures that are contemporary with ancient cities. So potentially some food for thought there as well.
I think the Echo Gear is interesting as well. I don't know if a homing beacon, like a sound that it puts out, is too sci-fi for Minecraft, or would have to have it be like a song or a chime or something more ethereal.
Yeah, that's what I'm picturing, I think, yeah.
Tied into Minecraft fantasy stuff. But what I like about the idea is that it's not an enchantment. So you're not rolling the dice to see what you get. Like you're actually saying, like, I want to use this Echo Shard on this pickaxe so that I never have to go looking for it. I'll be able to find it quite easily. And I don't know. I was trying to think about my first experience. I'm sure that it was just told to me by Steven or his sons. But unless you die within a quick jaunt of your respawn area, there's nothing in the game to indicate to you that, one, it's a yard sale when you die and you can go get your stuff again, or two, that it's only there for 5 minutes. I think you have to have that experience of, like, I know I died in this village and I'm coming back here to try to get my stuff, which I know from the last time I died that I can do, and then it's not here. So, like, did I take too long? Like, I don't know if there's anything in the game that indicates, like, you only have 5 minutes to go get your stuff. It's not like a timer comes up on screen, right? And even then, it's not just 5 minutes. It's 5 minutes once you load the chunks. So if you're far enough away when you die, you're actually good until you load those chunks. Then the 5-minute timer starts, right? So I like the idea of not punishing the players so much with that kind of unclear game mechanic, and having an, especially if, like, you have an achievement that says upgrade your gear with an Echo Shard to eliminate its despawning, and then you go, and then from that achievement you go, oh, so my gear can despawn. That's good to know, right? Like, that kind of stuff I think would be a good way to inform people. As I've been watching some people that have been doing first runs in Minecraft and deciding to use the achievement panel as, like, their education, like, well, what can I do? How do I do this? It gives you some information about how to proceed. When it comes to things like the chainmail armor, chainmail might be a bit dated. I feel like it's like the zombie horse. It's one of those things that has just been in the game. It was probably useful early on, but we're well beyond that now, where copper armor is just so much easier to get and better than chainmail armor. It's just an aesthetic thing, and I don't know how much you can apply aesthetics, and it goes back to our conversation about armor trim and not having any kind of real use for armor trim. It's just aesthetic. It doesn't change the function of your armor at all. But I did like the idea specifically of something like non-armor trim or other items in the game, like an Echo Shard, augmenting your armor. So I know this is similar to the Thorns effect, but what if you could combine pointed dripstone with your armor to give it spikes, both visually, but then also you have, like, greater defense, because now you have essentially like the Thorns effect, but you didn't have to do the RNG of the enchantment to get it. You just kind of applied it physically to the gear. Also adding something like coral to a helmet to have underwater benefits. I don't know what those would be, different than the Nautilus and the Conduit are to give you now, but the idea of having kind of coral antlers on your helmet to indicate that you've got this cool ability is kind of fun if you're on a multiplayer server or if you're into that kind of RP. I was just talking about this on stream the other day. When I'm playing something like Minecraft, I don't seem to really care that much about my player. I'm still wearing like a lumberjack farming outfit, and I didn't change it when I was doing the medieval town. I haven't changed it for the sci-fi area, although I've been toying around with looking up like a space suit or some sort of like Star Wars thing, maybe changing my elytra to look like X-Wing wings or something. But I never really pulled the trigger because I never see myself. And I'm on a multiplayer server, but it's generally a solo experience for me. And I put way more stock into armor and how I look on something like when I was playing World of Warcraft. Like I spent hours collecting the right gear, transmogging it so it all matched because I wanted to look cool, because you generally saw yourself as you were playing that game. It was third person all the time. So I liked the idea of walking into a city or walking into a zone and feeling pretty cool looking, you know, especially when expansions changed the style. Like when Mists of Pandaria came out, like everything kind of had that old ancient Chinese decorative look to it. Like everything was carved and had spirals, and gold and red and stuff was very prominent. So when it comes to stuff like this, like I feel like because you can't see the equipment, upgrades have to be more functional, or at least have some sort of function in addition to the view. Because like I don't think that people in general, I say that as I guess my own personal perspective. Like in general, I don't know if enough players care about how they look as far as their armor goes in Minecraft, or they've just been so used to it not mattering that they don't care as much.
Yeah, I mean, you've famously said that you don't really like the aesthetic of diamond armor. Sort of wearing the big blue suit feels a little bit strange, and it's like it's the same thing, right? Like I think players get so used to diamond either being a status symbol if you're on a multiplayer server, or just what you're wearing, and it doesn't really matter that much when you're seeing it in single player. You only notice it when you open your inventory or go into third person for some reason. I just did a brief deep dive on the Minecraft wiki just to take a look at the history of armor, and it turns out chain armor was one of the first armor types ever added to the game. In the survival tests that happened in September 2009, plate armor and chain armor were the two types. And then plate armor was removed in favor of there being iron armor, and cloth armor was added, in addition to a studded armor, sort of like a studded leather that you'd get in a more kind of realistic medieval game. And then eventually the studded armor got removed, cloth was changed to leather, and then diamond and gold were added to fill out the 5 different types that we've had since then, until obviously copper armor turns up a lot later. So I think it's really interesting that chain armor feels, like you said, like the zombie horse, a bit of a legacy feature that's just sticking around for the sake of it. You can't even craft it yourself, you find it from mob drops and you know, occasionally other places. So you often don't think of chain armor even as a choice. So really it's there for either aesthetic purposes or for dressing things up so they look a certain way in medieval builds. And it's a matter of aesthetics, whether you like the look of chain armor and want it to be more functional. And I think at that point, aesthetics are really something that players could decide to tweak with a resource pack. And I think the difference with Mojang making it a codified game mechanic is they have to balance this equation of, is this going to benefit enough players if we take the time to do this, versus are few enough players interested in this that the remainder would choose to resolve this using resource packs or data packs, right? So you could very easily boost the armor rating of chain armor if you wanted to keep wearing that. Likewise, you could use a resource pack to retexture diamond armor to look more like chain. And realistically, those are both relatively easy things, whereas it seems like, you know, a mechanic where you'd augment your armor has a limited range of options, and I feel like a lot of players are just going to want to skip up the chain to something like netherite anyway, because it's the higher tier stuff. So I like the idea in general, and I think aesthetic and like cosmetic armor is definitely an avenue they could go down in future if they wanted to vary things a bit more widely, like the armor sets you get in Minecraft Dungeons. But it feels like for the meantime, just doing that for chain armor to make it feel more viable in the meantime doesn't seem like an arena they're likely to step into for a little while, at least. We'll move on to our second email. This one comes in from Arthur J. and Natalie, and the subject is a new villager type. Hello, Johnny and Joel. I love listening to your podcast and just listened to Nautilus and Novelty. In the Chunk Mail section, you suggested a new type of carpentry villager. I really like mining and archaeology, but wish there was an easier way to locate trail ruins. Maybe there could be some ruins that had a new villager with a small campsite. The new miner could tell you about nearby archaeological sites, ores, or structures. Thanks. Player Cool Kids was bored to death while trying to locate a trail ruin and didn't even find an abandoned mineshaft.
Now that Arthur points it out, I'm really surprised there isn't already a miner villager.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like maybe Mojang wants the only miner to be the player. Like maybe that's your kind of focus and power. And I guess the Toolsmith sort of has that miner vibe, but I like the idea of being able to have more focus and more utility for finding archaeology related stuff. And I think it's cool that Arthur is really into it and looking for more ways to have that experience. It sounds like if you really like it, it's also hard to have that over and over again. Like if you find a trail ruin, great, but like how do you find the next one if you want to have that experience repeat? Mm-hmm. And I think that's an interesting way to go about it. And we have similar examples to this with aggressive mobs, with like underwater ruins and drowned, and I guess with pillager outposts, they're a lot larger than a campsite. But I feel like it's like having a wandering trader or a villager that's not quite part of the village, you know, and then is kind of an offshoot with like a campsite. And I guess igloos are also kind of a similar, you know, structure experience that has like a villager kind of tie-in. And so having like a campsite that would be like an old mining outpost could be really cool. I don't know whether maps would be the great way to do it. I wonder if the villager campsite with a miner could be a better flag for like, oh, within certain amount of blocks there's going to be a trail ruin because this campsite is here, so I should look nearby for the trail ruin rather than searching forever trying to just find the head of the trail. And that could be a cool way to do it, because you wouldn't want to, if he had maps, and like why would you just not add that to the cartographer's trades, right, in terms of getting maps to certain things. So I think that a new villager type would be cool. I don't know about maps to or indicating a abandoned mine shaft, because I feel like part of the reason for those is that sense of discovery when you enter into a giant chasm and you're like, oh, there's some telltale wood structures over there, there must be an abandoned mine shaft. Or you're just mining through the dirt looking for diamonds and then or stone, and then you stumble upon, you like mine right into the side of an abandoned mine shaft that you had no idea was there. And I don't know if maps for those would negate that discovery experience. So Mojang might want to have those kind of under wraps in the same way that you can't find a geode, I don't think, with a map. Like you just have to stumble upon them or find them. And I think that might be one way that they're going with it.
Yeah, I think the other thing about abandoned mine shafts is that unlike other structures, they are a lot more sprawling. Like you don't tend to get too many maps that lead you to these bigger structures. I think trial chambers honestly are some of the first structures that feel like they have that size but still have a map that leads you to, I think it's the entrance room that the map is even linked to, the one that has that kind of 3x3 door that doesn't really lead to or from anywhere. But if you think about, Woodland Explorer maps lead you to a woodland mansion, they're always more or less a fixed size. The structure varies slightly, but they're the same sort of shape. And then ocean monuments are always identical and the rooms inside are different. And so you end up with a map that leads you to a very definite location, whereas an abandoned mineshaft, you can come into it any number of ways, and they can go on for ages. There can even be overlapping abandoned mineshafts where it feels like it goes on for way longer, simply because a second structure generated next to it. The other thing is they'll generate sort of biome agnostic. They'll show up all over the world. And I don't know if this is still the case, but it used to be the case that they spawned much more frequently underneath ocean biomes. So getting a map that leads you to an abandoned mineshaft, but it being a top-down view and it's just an icon that's in the middle of an ocean, you kind of go, well, what is that if it's not an ocean monument, you know?
Right.
And expecting to dig through the ocean floor to locate one doesn't feel super realistic as far as, what the game expects of players to be capable of. So I think it's going to be potentially, yeah, stuff like that is left for discovery. And I sort of feel like Trail Ruins fall into the same camp, but for different reasons. Like, I think the archaeology-focused nature of Trail Ruins, thinking back to how thoughtful our discussion with Archaeoplays was when they were on the show, I sort of wonder if stumbling upon them is really meant to be part of the experience and sort of mimics a bit more of the considered and observant approach to the world that you're expected to take as an archaeologist in real life. I think the player is meant to sort of survey their surroundings for possible dig sites and treat things like that as a sign like, oh, there's some pottery that seems to have come up to the surface. Maybe there is something like that there. And obviously the pottery in this case is like there's a little bit of gravel and some terracotta blocks on the surface. But the notion there is that this seems like something that's worth investigating and digging up. And it's not necessarily part of the history of the game that the villagers would lead you there, because we don't know for certain what the archaeological site was part of, whether it was part of a previous villager civilization or some other culture that no longer exists at all in Minecraft that the villagers wouldn't have known about. So I think it's interesting to consider that aspect, and maybe that instead of being guided there by maps, it's really meant to mimic the idea of an archaeological find in real life. And they're also, if you're having trouble finding them, they are linked to specific biomes. So your search can be more focused. The old growth spruce forests, like the taiga forests, and I think tall birch forests as well. There are a few of those that specifically Trail Ruins will generate in. So those aren't like abandoned mineshafts where you could theoretically find one anywhere. You're not going to stumble into a Trail Ruin that's in a Badlands. It's going to be like a few very specific, typically forested biomes, and I think they sometimes spawn closer to water, like lakes or rivers, but I don't know if that's necessarily part of their mechanical, like, choosing where they spawn, or whether it's just a fluke of generation because there is often, a lake or a river nearby that kind of biome. But yeah, I think it's still possible to track those things down with a little bit of extra game knowledge. It's just about whether the game communicates that to you ahead of time. And I think the idea behind Trail Ruins is that they are something you stumble upon as a player rather than being guided to them.
I still like the idea of a miner villager, because I would very much like to trade for a helmet with a lamp on it, just selfishly.
Yeah.
And even if it's a candle or a lantern, like something that's kind of stuck on the front like an anglerfish, I would be down for it. Like, I think that having something on your head that would light your way when you're not lighting torches and stuff like that would be really, really fun. And again, like to go back to the aesthetics of the previous email, like it would be just a fun look if you wanted to have that look going on and also have it have a function. But I think that would be a fun thing to add to a miner villager.
Yeah, I think the cool thing about villagers as a system is that they're something that can expand in a similar way to how they expand the trades of the Wandering Trader every so often. And that really felt like my other answer to the Trail Ruins thing is like, cartographer villages, they sell you maps to larger, more complete kind of landmark structures, but the Wandering Trader seems like a better fit for, I saw this weird thing sticking out of the ground a few miles east of here, why don't you go and check it out? So yeah, maybe something to add to the Wandering Trader in future, but I like the idea of a miner villager. Yeah, I think there's definitely room for villager civilization to evolve in the same way that with the Copper Age update, players felt like they were stepping into more of like an industrial age for their own crafting and inventions.
Moving on to another email, Kenny the Logician has written in about transportation terrified. Hello, Joel and Johnny. I'm new to the podcast and wondering how you feel about the mechanical differentiation and balance of transportation methods in Minecraft, whether they are different and balanced enough, whether these are a priority, even if only temporarily, for what's coming in the next update, and whether the differentiation of transportation methods needs reconfiguration or to be redirected. I ask since the last few episodes when assessing the Nautilus, it seems like exploration was not on your radar and as an end for the transportation methods, which affects balance, often differing. If it's basically a sea camel, that's a bit better, but it's the first submersible mount, not the fifth equine. I could continue with more examples and scenarios to analyze, like speeding up minecarts, saddling shulkers, and transporting the ice boat glitch, but I presume this email is long enough already. Looking forward to the discussion. Kenny. Kenny's email went on to discuss a few of the things, including some examples like a new ice mount or ice boats or sleds, and things like ice skates, ice skating enchantments for boots, or an upgrade to the Frostwalker enchantment to increase movement speed. So I thought that was an interesting take on it. And what I like about this email was the point of differentiating between mounts for transportation and gear for transportation. So a quick one, we've got all the different mounts. You've got like donkeys, and you've got horses, and you've got striders, pigs, and then you've got elytra, you've got minecarts and boats. It's thinking about like gear versus mounts. And I think that mounts have been getting a lot of attention lately, where there really hasn't been that much for gear in terms of changing the way that you traverse. We've had gear upgrades, like they've added copper gear and netherite armor, but none of that affects your movement speed, with the exception, I guess, of the swift sneak enchantment. That was be the most recent thing in memory that affects your movement. But that's more of a local movement as opposed to transportation or exploration. Like, it doesn't make you faster in a way that would benefit you from exploring the world. It's going to make you faster for building or sneaking around in a trial chamber, but that's about it. It doesn't really affect exploration that much. So I thought it'd be kind of fun to talk about the differences between gear and mounts, and like what kind of gear we'd like to see in terms of a upgrade.
Yeah, I feel like it's interesting to also think about the stuff that straddles that definition, especially with mounts having the focus right now. Happy Ghasts are, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I'm trying to think about it. They are one of the first mobs where we have a means to expand their storage capacity or their carrying capacity, not just by adding a chest to the mob itself, but by leashing it to something else. Like, the Happy Ghast is really the first horse and cart example that we have in Minecraft, which is wild considering how long we've had horses. But I think with the reworking of leash mechanics, it kind of makes the notion of having like a horse and carriage or a horse and cart a much more real possibility. If only Minecraft could figure out where it stood on wheels. Because if you consider, like, obviously this is going to be like a circular wheel, or it's going to be a square wheel for the joke, but then does that look realistic? How do you really show it, like, turning and so forth? You could theoretically leash a chest boat or a chest minecart to a horse now, but it's not going to look like the horse is pulling a cart or a barrow or something like that behind it. It's going to just look like you've stapled this thing to the back of a horse, whereas the Happy Ghast obviously feels a little bit better for transportation. And so I wonder if maybe if they can clear this idea of, like, we have to put a round thing in Minecraft, or, find some sort of approximation of that, you could straddle that line between equipment, a crafted thing that the player has come up with, and the animals just being upgradable in their storage in the same way that, like, donkeys or llamas can have chests attached to them or something like that. And you could end up with mounts coming more into focus as little kind of traveling traders and things like that, or even make it look more like they're farm animals. They're bringing a plow with them, and maybe have the opportunity to create more farmland out of that than just hoeing blocks individually or something. Like, there's maybe some interest to that for me, which I know goes a little bit off the track of Kenny's email here, but it's not even just for transportation. I think it's also about, like, how they fit into the lifestyle of Minecraft and the types of life that Minecraft is trying to simulate.
Yeah, I noticed that in the examples that Kenny gave, there was no wheels. It was like sleds or boats with skis or like that kind of stuff, right?
And really creative ways around the fact that I think minecarts are supposed to have wheels, but they're almost like hidden by the texture of the minecart. You can barely sort of see where a wheel arch would be, Yeah.
And wheels, I mean, while wheels on railed vehicles turn, obviously, they're not necessarily wheels as we think about them in a vehicle, like in a car or a horse and buggy. They're more like to keep things on the track as opposed to really roll them forward, because without the track they're kind of useless, right? Not very practical in that way. But I think that I like the idea of some sort of horse and buggy or horse and cart or something. I mean, something like an ice boat or a sled is limited to that one biome. I mean, I say that, and we can row boats across deserts right now, so like it's not like it would be out of Minecraft's weirdness to have a horse-drawn something that can just glide across everything, right? which might actually be a cool way to implement your idea of having it be like a plow. Like maybe if it's on dirt, it would leave a trail where it would plow the dirt behind it, which if you don't do anything to would eventually turn back to grass, right? It would eventually get to dirt and then turn back to grass.
Yeah.
And then would that have an effect on sand? Probably not. Same
Mhm.
thing with snow, probably not. I think that's an interesting take, but I'm more interested in the gear sort of aspect than more mounts. And I feel like one of the other things that has come up in the past, and I'll bring this in here now just so we can kind of talk about it all at once, was an older email from the archives from Donaraf, a community miner in our Discord. Gotta go fast is the name of the subject, and this is responding to a conversation that we had around rollerblading in Minecraft a long time ago. There are mods that add roller skates into the game, and I think that you're onto something here for longer traversal. The one thing that's a must and is in the Reliquary mod implementation is that it gives you a step assist, much like a horse that goes up with one block at a time, as well as a lot of speed. As all that said, I would love to see the Elytra skip come back because it was simply so satisfying when you hit the right moment, even if they remove the momentum that you can gain from it. Thanks for the topic. I really love listening to your takes every week. Donaraf plummeted to his death by misjudging his jump over a ravine on his new roller skates. And, I think
that's a Simpsons episode, isn't it? I'm
yeah,
pretty
yeah,
sure.
yeah. I think that the ice skates thing is what made me think of like, I know there was an email about roller skates a while ago.
Yeah.
Wanted to pull that out of the archive and kind of get that into the conversation because I think that could be something interesting. Now, roller skates are a little bit more modern, I guess, from a Minecraft perspective. But
Yeah.
I was thinking about this on the stream the other day where I've been going up and down and getting on and off of the Happy Gast constantly, also trying to get up to the top of the build constantly, and a single one strength rocket is often far too much for what I need to do. And a while ago, I played with a mod that had some sort of, I think it was slime boots, and you had
Yeah.
a jump assist with that. And it was not just a jump assist, like it was not overpowered, but it was really noticeable. It wasn't just jumping 2 blocks like with a beacon, like it was a good sized jump, kind of like a Jedi jump. And I really liked it. It was really fun. It didn't feel overpowered. You had to repair them, so like they broke down over time. And it was fun. Like it was really fun to just like get into a section and realize I need to get the lay of the land here and just like bound to the top of a tree like a grasshopper. I'm just like, oh, I can see much better now. And then you could leap from treetop to treetop, or you could jump from one thing to another, jump over rivers, which I know depending on the horses and the speed that you have, you can sometimes clear a small river with a horse. But these jump boots didn't have the restrictions that horses do traveling through forested terrain where like you hit the head of the horse and the leaves of the trees and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. And so I think that having some sort of additional traversal, and it doesn't have to be something like we think of as like roller skates or ice skates, something that you could add to boots could be really, really cool. Not just an enchantment, because we both have discussed at length recently about the bloating of the enchantment system, but having something that you can physically apply to gear and have it have a desired predictable result. Slime, being sticky, maybe not the best idea for slime boots. Maybe something else that has different quality or something to it that would make them bouncy. I don't know what that might be. Although I guess if you land on a slime block, you bounce on it. So that maybe tracks. I was thinking about other things like putting wings or feathers on a boot to give you a jump boost could be kind of fun.
Springs, maybe something like that.
Springs, yeah. I was trying to think about some of the stuff that you could get in Minecraft Dungeons. Some of the gear had a fun look to it and would have like a physical change to it that would also give you some sort of physical attribute or augment. And that kind of stuff is really cool. I also like the idea of minecarts and playing with minecarts, which is what Mojang seems to be already doing with Minecraft snapshots and new features. But I'm wondering, like, does it have to be the minecart, or could it be maybe the rails? Like, we have a lot of new material in the game, and rails are still just iron and sticks. And you could make rails out of different things, maybe copper, maybe netherite, maybe redstone. Like, there's different things you could do. And I'm wondering, like, instead of just having like the activator rail or the other type of rails, maybe there could be some sort of like jump or ejection rail or something that could not just make minecarts faster, but also make them more interesting, because I think that's the problem with the gear, is that any gear that's added to Minecraft right now is going to be in between gear, because I don't see them adding something that's going to be faster or more efficient than Elytra. So once you get Elytra, you're probably going to be at the top of your game. So anything that they add in between has to be either novel or more fun or both. And so, or niche, I guess, not novel. But it's one of those things where having minecarts do extra cool stuff when they've been the same for so long in the game would pull a lot of players, I think, into like doing some more minecart stuff. Even though it's more practical to fly with Elytra, it could be more fun to go by minecart, especially if you could have crafted experiences. Thinking about like when you're flying with Elytra, if you wanted to create some sort of Elytra course, that's a lot of work and not a practical thing to do. But if you had a minecart course that took you from one base to another, you have the opportunity to decorate those tunnels and have that be a really cool experience as you go through. I think about that when I think about like potential fast travel in the Nether with ice boats or something like that. Decorating that tunnel so that when you go by it at speed, it has like a pattern or blinking lights that go by or something, a spiral, just kind of any kind of cool visual thing. And I think that if they added those opportunities to minecarts, or maybe even speeding up foot traffic, could be cool in that way too. Would be a good way to do it. It makes me think of Satisfactory. They have these things, they're called Blade Runners, and they make you go faster and jump higher. And it just makes building and getting up to the top of things to look down a lot easier. And I think like some sort of boot augment or some sort of minecart augment is where I lean in terms of transportation upgrades.
Yeah, I think it's difficult because you've got the inventory economy to think about as well. You have the fact that anything that's, if it's going to be a set of boots, then that has to replace whatever boots the player is already wearing. And a lot of players really don't like swapping out armor, even though it's still possible to hot swap it from the hotbar now. It's still kind of irritating to have to ditch your netherite boots or whatever you happen to wear for the sake of putting on your spring boots, or like even the trade between like Frostwalker and Depth Strider. I feel like people don't often make that switch because they'd rather just get in a boat to cross the ocean instead of, pop on the Frostwalker boots to run that way. And so I think it's interesting having to balance that stuff. Likewise, if it's a tool that you use from your hotbar, if it's something like, in addition to the slime boots, I think those sort of let you land without full damage, but there was a slime sling that was what you used to like fling yourself around in modded Minecraft. And that's another tool to have on your hotbar. And if we don't have any means of more effectively managing or, putting away tools like that from the hotbar when you're not using them, then it becomes another equipment slot that is taken up by something you don't always want to use. I think the same goes for things like, the spyglass that we've had recently. Some of the additional weapons, things like tridents and spears, tend to end up in people's ender chests. The mace, same thing, right?
Yeah.
Like it ends up in your ender chest because you like the idea of having it, but you're not using it constantly. And so if it's going to be moment-to-moment gameplay, something that you'd rather not live without, it's got to fit into that economy of this is going to be in my inventory constantly. How much am I actually going to use this? How much am I going to resent the fact that it takes up an inventory slot that could be used for building blocks? And where do you find those sort of like, middle grounds of making it approachable as a feature to use? Then if it's a minecart, it's out there in the world and it has to fit whatever parameters. And I'm kind of curious if they're working on any more of the traversal stuff internally at Mojang, or if they're skewing back towards, well, we've added a few more mobs into the game. Let's think more about how we can, fit those mobs to the environment. What other, environmental stuff we can add? What are the biomes? What are the blocks? I want to go back to Kenny's email briefly just to talk about the use of the Nautilus for exploration. And I think that's a fair point, is the kind of thing that we've not talked about using the Nautilus much for exploring oceans and for sort of traveling long distances, and how it compares to using boats and that kind of thing. And we'll probably get more into that once I've spent a bit more time with the Nautilus as a mob, and maybe if Joel, if you've updated to Mounts of Mayhem or beyond in future, we'll circle back to the Nautilus and talk about it some more. But I think the problem is, one that I've seen come up in the Minecraft community a fair bit recently, is that oceans aren't all that big. And I feel like people occasionally bring up the desire to have more continents that are surrounded by oceans, a bit more like they are on Earth, rather than having oceans more or less be a biome that's landlocked, surrounded by all of the other biomes encircling it. And I think that's really where it comes down to like the balance of exploration. Like you can explore deep into oceans with a Nautilus and not have to worry about the water breathing aspect of it. But in terms of going point to point across an ocean, I don't think the Nautilus is necessarily more advantageous than having a boat. And there aren't that many things that you need to explore in the ocean that you can't get access to by other means, except for the structures, except for shipwrecks and ocean monuments and the occasional drowned ruins. So I sort of wonder if maybe the Nautilus could have value added to it retroactively if they decide to make changes to oceans in future. If they decide to make oceans more expansive or introduce more features to oceans that are less common elsewhere in the world and are really something that you go to the oceans for, besides what we already have, like Prismarine being an ocean-exclusive resource and maybe coral reefs and things like that. But I find that a lot of people aren't that keen on building with coral, often because they don't like destroying coral in reference to sort of how endangered coral reefs are in the natural world. So I think there's a bit of a balance that ultimately makes the Nautilus kind of a middle ground kind of mob for me. And I'm hopeful that, like other mobs, more value will be added to it in future in the same way that they seem keen to go back and give new uses to old features. Cactus as a food for camels, that kind of thing. Like there's interest to how they're going to approach that kind of stuff in future to me.
Yeah, I haven't had an opportunity to mess with the Nautilus outside of just taking some screenshots for title cards for the show. I do have a couple of ocean monuments that are near the sci-fi area, and I'm curious as to whether a Nautilus would be advantageous in either sacking the ocean monuments or in the building process of draining them and doing something cool with them, if that provides something that has capabilities of making that easier. Then I'm curious to see what that might look like. And I also haven't experimented much with the Nautilus in terms of the idea I had a while ago about like ice and waterlogged blocks and see if you can speed them up and all that kind of stuff. We'll have to mess around with that when the time comes.
Yes, yeah, definitely a little bit of fun to be had there, I'm sure. But yeah, interesting discussion and something that I'm sure we'll see. Mojang aren't afraid to add new tools into the game. Like the spear more or less adds a new like traversal method by itself, having the ability to like lunge and air dash and that kind of thing. So I imagine they've got some of that stuff on the back burner, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they get up to in the new year. For now, that's where we're going to wrap up this episode of The Spawn Chunks. You can find more information about the show and links to some of the stuff that we've talked about today over at thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show is composed by me, and The Spawn Chunks is proud as ever to be a listener-supported podcast. If you're getting some value out of the show, why not consider putting some value back in? You can visit patreon.com/thespawnchunks to join our community. Pledging at any of our paid tiers gets you an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat. You can listen to the show live when we record it in Discord every Monday, usually once we're back on our regular schedule at least. And we have our monthly and quarterly hangouts for you to join in, hear the behind-the-scenes news about the podcast, and share what you've been up to in Minecraft that month. We currently, as of this recording, have 262 patrons, which is great, but we'd always love to welcome more people in. Special thanks go out to our content engineers, Kinebeald, Hunter555, Jumbo Sale, Mindtrip Media, and that Penguin Dude. Thank you so much for your support on this episode.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. You can find us at The Spawn Chunks on your favorite social media. New episodes are published on Mondays on your favorite podcasting platform, with a video version on YouTube and a video version on Spotify. Email the show at spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. You can find the RSS feed on the spawnchunks.com, and the patron-only RSS feed is on the Patreon page, and that's where you can listen to the render distance, the extended version of the podcast.
My name is Johnny, but online I go by Pixelriffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/pixelriffs, where the Minecraft Survival Guide is currently in its 3rd season. I normally stream 3 days a week on Twitch, but I imagine I'll take a break so I go and see family over the holidays. In the meantime, you can find me voicing the unofficial Hermitcraft recap over on YouTube. Aside from that, I'm at Pixelriffs on Blue Sky and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
Speaking of changes to schedules, you can find me at Joel Duggan on most social media, and that's where I will be tweaking the schedule of my own streaming over the holidays. I do plan on streaming some, but you can check that for the time changes, as the middle of the week, of course, is going to be Christmas. But normally it is Tuesday through Friday at 9 a.m. on Twitch, and then Saturdays at 1. I do Friday Lego, and the rest of it has been Minecraft lately, but I'm hoping over the holidays to expand and grab some other games and do some more fun stuff on stream. So check it out. It's all available through social media at Joel Duggan or on Twitch at Joel Duggan.
Thanks for visiting The Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite, Happy holidays.